the plane ride and the bus ride were very long. So actually, I think they have plane rides just straight to the Cauayan Mission, which is great. But even then, it's a long ride. I mean, you take from Utah to different stops. Eventually, you arrive in the Philippines, and it's a more or less 14-hour trip. And then sometimes you even take another ride. For us, it was another 10-hour bus ride, and that can be a little dizzying. We kind of got off the plane and we just didn't know where to look. We hadn't taken a shower and we weren't feeling great. But I think we were all excited to actually get into the field. We were kind of having an introduction to our mission for the longest time, for 9 weeks in the MTC. It's 6 weeks now, but even every week that goes by, you just want to get on with it. You want to go in the field, do something about it. And we were just very excited. And so even though it was long and difficult to get there, ultimately it was just kind of we kind of reaching a climax to where it was our I don't want to say our tensions, but our excitement was rising, and it was a good experience. And I've never done that ride again except coming back. So just saying that I traveled the world on a plane is kind of interesting. First memories of the rest of my life, I remember thinking this is going to be my life for 2 years, and it was kind of difficult to think that. I did go to school for a year before serving, so it was nice to have that buffer of not being at home. But still being in a new culture, being in a new situation, arriving in Manila, it's very, very packed, very tight, traffic everywhere. And I love how they have little stickers on the back of these jeepneys, which is their mode of public transportation. It's kind of like a public bus. And it says, "Ask me how my driving is going," and then it has a number on the bottom. And then they're all intertwined together, and there's no traffic lights or anything. I thought it was funny and ironic. That was our first experience. It was beautiful seeing the Manila Temple. Arriving to my mission itself after the bus ride, or the plane ride, that is today, is a little suspenseful. We were all kind of anticipatory, a little anxious as to who would be our trainers. Would they be foreign? Would they be American? Never know. You were really curious. First impressions of the mission, and I remember it being really just a kind of a haze, with excitement, with anxiety, which is normal. It's normal and it's healthy, I think, to have a little anxiety about something that you care about. I remember sitting down in the pews with the rest of my district from the MTC and those who came with us, and we were all just quiet, dead quiet. Normally would be talking, joking around, but there was just kind of a very thick feeling of what's going to happen next. And so I was the last one to be called, actually. And so that feeling just built up every time one of my companions or one of my constituents or peers got called and went in the back and sat with their companion. And I'm just like, did they forget about me? All these things are going through my mind. And finally, they call my companion. He is Filipino, native Filipino. And he comes forth. Actually, he doesn't come forward. He gets pushed forward by the rest of the missionaries, just because he I find out later, was actually really nervous about training an American. It just goes to show people are people. When they're not used to a different culture, you're nervous, and you kind of have to understand that. I understood that. He wasn't the best at English, but he did try. That's one thing about most of my companions and the culture in general, is that they're very generous, very nurturing, and they'll try to help you as much as they can. I remember my companion doing great things for me. He'd translate songs for me, just some way that I could learn the language. He just was willing to help. He was probably one of the greatest in my life, one of the greatest examples of charity. And just those few hours with him were just very nerve-wracking again. We didn't talk a lot. I tried to talk in the limited Tagalog that I had. How was your day? How was the weather? Where are you from? What do you want to eat? And then it was done. I was like, what else am I going to say? I don't know what to say. And so I kind of like slip in English, what we call Taglish. You slip in English, you slip in Tagalog. And then it just became English. I didn't know what to say. I was just like, well, kind of reached an impasse. I don't really have anything else. Shells in my artillery of vocabulary in Tagalog. And so we get on a van, which is another form of transportation for more rural areas, which holds about, I'd say about 15 people, a good 15 amount of people, but they always squeeze in about 21. And that was my first experience with that. where people are constantly popping your like personal space bubble. And I had way too much luggage. I had, I think, 2 huge duffel bags, very large, each weighing about like, I don't know, 60 pounds. Ridiculous. 65 pounds, and then a small duffel bag that had like all my toiletries and everything. My mother packed for me. I'm not gonna lie. And there was like toiletries that would last a year to a year and a half. Like toothbrushes, I had like 20 toothbrushes. You don't need that. Don't ever. Just take it as much as you can, and they'll have things there. They'll have toothbrushes. They'll have shampoo. Like they're not that wanting. They have stuff there. They have necessities. Anyway, they couldn't fit any of my luggage on the van, so I was thinking that, oh no, what am I going to do? Am I just going to have to pass out all these like toothbrushes to all the kids on the road and like all the people? And they eventually found a way. I mean, they're very intuitive, they use their ingenuity to find out a way. They tied my luggage down to the van with rope, and almost dragged it the whole way to my area. But anyway, that was, as far as culture shock for the first few days, it was positive. Shocking, I say would be the best adjective to describe my first few days there. But I was excited, and my companion was doing the best he could. That in a nutshell is pretty much my first experience with the Philippines. So the Cauayan City Philippines Mission is unique in that it does have what the Filipinos claim to be the 8th wonder of the world, which is Banaue rice terraces. It's a very popular place to go visit on P days if you have a chance. It's beautiful, especially Balut. If you ever go to Balut, one of the best looking places in the world. It's a hike to get to this waterfall, but if you get there, it's very you feel accomplished. And it's a wonderful trip for a zone if you ever have a chance. It does take all day, but it does make other missions in the Philippines a little what's the word, envious, I suppose, that they don't have that. It's a beautiful place. I went I think 2 or 3 times. Never did Balut though, which is a regret that I do have. So if they get a chance, I'd recommend any missionary go and hike Balut. Cauayan Mission is interesting. I love it. Most missionaries will say that their mission is the best in the world. I think that's biased, and I do think my mission was great. I love nearly every aspect of my mission, from the food to the people to the culture to the individual areas. But one thing about the Cauayan Mission is that there's not very many cities. It's not very metropolitan. It's very rural. You have a lot of either rice fields, which are called bukids, or you have a lot of cornfields. They call it maize, which is corn. And so most of the time when you're walking from house to house, you either get, empty lots, or you get like just a long, as far as I can see, field of grass or corn. It's kind of pristine. It's beautiful in its own way. I love that. I really miss that. You don't get that here at all. And on the opposite end of these fields are these beautiful mountains at certain points, and it's mountainous. It's a mountainous region. Most people won't think it is, but it very much so is. What else? They have these native monkeys that are kind of interesting every once in a while. They're rare to see, but when you see one, they're kind of fun. I wouldn't recommend you play with one, but they are. I mean, you don't have any monkeys here that just are like squirrels, that they just jump around. But that's interesting. I love that. I love it's very lush in certain parts of the Philippines, with the weather. It's tropical, beautiful, very beautiful. There is no ocean, so it's right next to the coast, but there's a mountain range blocking the mission from the ocean. So you're close to the ocean. That beautiful view, but you never see it. Never saw the ocean until I got off my mission, which is not a bad thing. I was never, you don't have that temptation of being like, oh, I just want to go to the beach. But they do have beautiful spots because it is very rural. It's very, out in the country, which I really loved. You don't get a lot of that in America. Well, most of us don't. And so it's kind of kept from the, what's the word? From the world in a way. It's kind of encapsulated in its own little way. You do have a lot of people. You have people setting up shanty homes all over the place, but for the most part, it's beautiful. The culture, they are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. People you don't know. Toward the end of my third area, we were walking around. It was the middle of the night. They love having parties, you know. They're not really frugal people, but they do like to have fun in all aspects of their life. And so you have a party every once in a while. One of the main things that they have, especially in rural areas, I'm sure in metropolitan areas as well, is videoke, which is basically karaoke. They call it videoke. And they'll do it to all hours of the night. And they all party. They love that. They enjoy it. It's fun. I enjoy it. Like people having fun, enjoying each other as a family. They'll get the whole neighborhood involved. And anyway, we were walking back from teaching. It was like, I don't know, 8:30. And walking toward our apartment, trying to see if anyone's available. And the whole neighborhood was at this a birthday party. What seemed like the whole neighborhood. It was probably just a family. They have big families there. And they just call us over, like, hey, elders, come over here, like, come eat the food. We're like, sure. What's your name again? And it was just great. That happened multiple times. They're just very courteous, very nice people. It's part of their culture, but honestly, I think for a lot of them, it's just part of their being as well. You have every once in a while, you feel like, oh, they're just doing it because it's culturally accepted. But for the most part, especially the older women, which we call nanais, are just so genuine. They're just so sweet. I feel like I had so many grandmas in the mission. It was great. They're so sweet. Oh my gosh. The men are they like to have fun. You get a long range of different kind of guys, but most of the Filipino men, if they're good men, they're good men. You know, very genuine, very sweet. The women, I mean, not to defend my gender or, on my side but I have to advocate their side of the story. The women in the Philippines are some of the best women I've ever met in my life. Very sweet. They're not, a lot of them aren't raised in the church, but they're very genuine, very nurturing, very, womanly. And it's not a bad thing at all. I think it's very beautiful, and the way they love their womanhood. They can be sassy, but that's good, that's good to have a little sass. If they're too bland, it kind of ruins everything, I like to have a little spice in your soup. But yeah, they are very loyal. I think to type 5 women, I'd just say they were loyal, and Filipino women. I've had some great experience meeting all kinds of different people, and most of them would just go and buy us food. They wouldn't even know us. We'd sit down. We'd say, "Hey, hello, how are you?" We're missionaries. We'd have to talk about something that would better your life, something that could draw you closer as a family, and something that would affect the spirituality of your home, and would ultimately just result in the best benefit for your family, more or less. We'd change it up every once in a while, but I'd say out of 10 houses you'd visit, maybe 8 of them would buy you some kind of snack. I'd go home, they'd buy just soda, because they know that, most of them know that your stomach can't take tap water, because tap water, don't drink the water there. It's the best way to get sick. So, unless it's filtered, which is usually not. But they'll give you soda, and sometimes it's all you get, like all day, and you have to finish it, or else they'll be like, oh, I don't know, they'll be slightly offended. And so you want to drink it all. We split it between a liter of soda, a liter and a half of soda between my companion and I, 10 times. You go home, you don't want to eat. You just fill up with soda. you had a soda feast. And it would be beautiful, because people are just so nice. You realize that, but it's also just like, ugh, you just feel so bloated. Yeah. The Filipino people are very sweet, sincere. My family actually came to pick me up at the end. And they commented on something that I really thought about before. While there is crime in the Philippines, especially in the metropolitan areas, the cities, the rural parts of the Philippines are very genuine, very nice, and they love foreigners. They love Americans. Well, it's more like they idolize Americans, or idolize really any kind of foreigner, just because they're different. There's not a large diversity in the Philippines. And so yeah, when they were there, people were very genuine. People saying, "Hey, hello, how are you?" All the little kids would follow, my sister around, like, "Oh, you're beautiful," and just because she has white skin, and people would like be coming up to them and taking pictures. You think they're like some kind of celebrity, and they were, walking around the streets on one of my areas, and my father works out of Mexico, and he travels around the world, and he said these are some of the nicest people I've ever, met. There's no, cops anywhere, but it's almost like they don't need them. It feels safe. It feels good. It feels okay, which is something big to say because my father's gone through a lot overseas and even, domestically and in America. And so for him to say that, it's a really telltale sign of how Filipinos treat others and treat each other. Now, that's not saying that there's no crime, like I said. There were, robberies, but in my whole time in the mission, I've never heard of someone being held at gunpoint or anything like that. And if there are, crimes, it's usually just out of poverty. They're kind of, it's wrong, but at the same time, you can sympathize. You're working every day for a bowl of rice, for a sack of rice, and that's all you can have. And then you put salt on your rice because it's just all you have. And so when they steal, it's not to justify it, but a lot of people, several missionaries got stuff stolen out of their houses. But I think at the end they weren't very angry, just because, well, one, they didn't lock the door, and two, just some of the people you see every day are just struggling, and you can understand that. So if it is crime, it's indirect, not non-aggressive. In my mission, anyway. Now, if you go into Manila, can't say anything about that. Usually the crime rate goes up exponentially, but it's a very safe place for the most part. It's a beautiful place, very humble. Maybe not the cleanest, but it makes up for it in scenery, the people, the culture, the food, the experience. It was a great part of my life. It was not only the best 2 years because I served, it was the best 2 years because I expanded my mind, opened my mind to different cultures, different people. Not everyone thinks a certain way. You don't always get to success through following path ABC. You can follow path XYZ. You can follow this. You don't have to express yourself in the same way like we do. Like I'm talking to you right now. If I was speaking in Tagalog, I'd approach the situation a little bit more differently. And that's beautiful. It just goes to show that, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but at the end he says, you have apples and you have oranges, but in the end we're all fruit. Like, we're different in some ways, but in the end we're all children of our Heavenly Father. And it's beautiful to recognize that, and it's beautiful to see the diversity in people. And I loved it. The culture is beautiful. I really miss it, honestly, sometimes. Foods is a topic that I'd love to discuss about the Philippines, just because you don't really get the same food anywhere else, I don't believe. I've never heard of it before. And in generalization, the food that you usually eat is some sort of vinegar mixed with soy sauce, and they throw in, at times, ginger. They have other things like oregano instead of ginger, different spices, but it's mainly that. They love stews. They love soups. They love soups. You hear the word sabaw all the time. It means soup, basically. They love. And even if something shouldn't have soup, they'd rather have soup than it's just very funny. But you do get a lot of soups. You have a lot of meat, pork, actually, a lot of pork, a lot of fish as well, because you are close to the ocean. You can't see it, but you do get a lot of fish. Fish is beautiful and delicious. I actually didn't like fish before serving in the Philippines. Came home, love it. Tilapia. Love tilapia, especially when it's fresh. Now, as far as the exotic foods, if you have the stomach to, delve into the exotic foods, I would recommend it, definitely, if you're an adventurous person. Now, you don't want to go to some like shanty, like little side bar, side restaurant and taste whatever food they have. You want to go to something that looks halfway decent. And I think my favorite food that they have as far as exotic goes is called Dennou, which is basically, it sounds bad when I'm going to say it, but keep in mind that, even though something sounds and looks bad, it doesn't mean that it tastes bad. It's blood pudding. And basically, is you get blood and you get a little bit of meat. Sometimes it's intestinal meat, and they saute it and they mix it with a little bit of spice, maybe some pepper, and it mixes so well with rice. I love it. The first time I had it, my companion told me it was chocolate. Like they cook chocolate. Obviously, it didn't smell like chocolate, and I was just like, I tasted it, and I was like, I knew it wasn't chocolate at that point, but I didn't know what it was. Anyway, I ate the whole plate, and I was just, this is really good. So, are you gonna tell me what it is? He's like, yeah. Well, it's blood. And I'm just like, what? Yeah, it's blood, and it tasted delicious. Ever since then, I was in love with it. I didn't care. Probably not the best for you. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't have a stomach for it, but I ate it as much as I could because I knew after I got home, no one's going to cook that, right? They do have a lot of exotic foods. I could literally talk about it for hours, but as far as the ones that I've tasted that I can comment on are they do like grubs. They like not cockroaches. Sorry, they don't eat cockroaches. Don't worry about that. They like crickets. They do like small worms that you can find in different fruits and stuff like that. They're kind of white, and when you crisp them, when you fry them, they taste like popcorn and with a little bit of butter. It's like naturally buttery. It's interesting. Like you wouldn't expect it, but it's actually very appetizing. Again, I think one thing that everyone would probably want to know about is the balut. Balut is actually a duck egg. It's not a chicken egg, it's a duck egg that's fertilized. Most eggs that we have here aren't fertilized, but this is fertilized, which means that the embryo is actually forming. And when you crack it open, it's partially formed, partially not formed. And you even get some kind of it sounds bad, but it's really not that bad if you take a bite of it. If you have the guts to take a bite out of it and don't worry about what it looks like. It tastes like, well, a mixture between an egg and chicken, which basically it is, or egg and duck. I would definitely recommend people have it. I didn't have it very frequent, but when my companion wanted it, we definitely partied up with some balut. One apiece. Dog. Don't eat dog. Shouldn't have. There are facts about dog. I won't go into it. I stay away from it. It's healthy to stay away from it, but it was an interesting experience. It doesn't taste as weird as you might think. It kind of tastes like beef. If you don't cook it well, it can be very sort of rubbery, I suppose, like more rubbery than other meats. Not because of you have to cook it a certain way, and you have to cook it well. I remember the first time I had dog. I don't know if you ever remember those cartoons where people are eating meat and they kind of like pull on the meat, and then like a second later it comes off. It's kind of like what it was. I was chopping down on this dog, whatever, and I couldn't get the meat off, and so I like held it with my hands and pulled at it, and it kind of stretched and it came off. Not a good experience. It's really not a healthy thing, but. They have a lot of things. They even eat monitor lizards called bayawak. Monitor lizard is a relative to the species of Komodo dragon. It's a smaller, and they're very plentiful in the Philippines. And so when you get a chance, I'd recommend you have one just for the experience. Usually they'll sell them on the side of the road. You can take it to a member, and the member that knows how to cook it. That's an interesting experience. Food. I miss the food. What can I say? I'm an adventurous person, so I do miss the food. I liked all the food. I'd even, I'd eat the squid. Not a fan of squid. I'd eat the dog. Obviously, I'm not a fan of dog. I eat pretty much everything. They have something called ampalaya, which is the most bitter thing you've ever put in your mouth. It is so bitter. It defines bitter. I'm sure, people were trying to figure out how to, what certain words were in English back in the Stone Ages, and they just took a bite of it and they're like, oh, bitter. It's that bitter. It's so bitter. And also they have the bile, which is basically soup. They have chicken broth, and then they put in the intestinal, your stomach has kind of like a black lining. It looks like sponge. It's used to break down the foods. Pass them through the intestines. They put that in there, so there's like these black things floating around that look like sponges, and then they crack open the gallbladder. Let it come up. And that's what's called papaitan, which is basically what it just means. I'll make it bitter. That's all it means. So both of those things are bitter. The vegetable that I was talking about isn't bad. It's actually really good for you. It's really, really good for you. It's healthy. But the bile, run away from it if you can. I try to. We'll talk about the culture later, and I'll mention that. I don't know if is it playing?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. The culture, you have to eat. You don't have to, but they want you to eat the food. They don't have a lot, they're very in humble settings. And so when someone gives you something, you want to eat it. Obviously, you want to power it down, but you want to eat as much as you can and be, courteous about it. And so sometimes I'd go to different houses and all they'd have was this bile soup. And for the life of me, I could not swallow it. I tried so many different ways, tried to put all this like vinegar. Sometimes they'll have vinegar or soy sauce, which they call toyo, and vinegar, which they call suka. And you just put it on there, try to get rid of the taste, and you can't. And the best thing I would do is just say, I'm really not, because I'm foreign, I'm really not, like, my stomach can handle it. I'm kind of weak. And they're like, they just say, oh yeah, I understand. Like, our food is too strong. I'm like, yeah, your food is too strong. I just can't do it. And so I usually get by with that. But yeah, I just would not eat that at all. Papaitan, if you ever want to try it, more power to you. There was a day toward the end of my mission. We were tracting pretty early. Got out of the apartment about 9 after doing our studies, and or was it 10? Anyway, it was in the morning. We were walking down a road that was pretty far away from our house. We traveled to this road, and we walk down every once in a while just to follow up on people that we've talked to in the past. And we went to this one house where we had offered our message to one of the residents there. It was a family. It was a nanay, which means a grandma or older woman, and then tatay, which means an older man. And they were married, and the man was deaf, but very happy, very jolly. And the woman was very spiritual. It was a great experience. And the man was helping the wife out in the garden. It was beautiful, kind of a Joseph Smith kind of picturesque kind of idea when Joseph Smith's sitting on the mat. It's kind of the same thing. It flashed through my mind. And I was like, oh, this is great. And so we OAM'd them first of all, and then we came back I came back with a different companion because it's kind of far away from our apartment. Anyway, upon arriving there, we found out that the woman had been crying for a while. She was on a bench, and she was just weeping. Really heart-wrenching. So we asked her, what's wrong? Remember us? What's wrong? We didn't really know what to do. You're kind of awkward in those situations when someone's grieving and you just don't know why. And she informed us that her husband had just passed away a couple of days previous. And we talked to her about the situation, and her family was in the background, sons, daughters, what have you. And she was just kind of alone. And so we decided to share a message, and I think it was a great opportunity to share the gospel, but that wasn't our ultimate focus. And let me explain what I mean by that. Ultimately, the gospel is why you serve a mission, because it provides salvation for someone, and it shows that you love not only them but God, because you're serving them, and when you're serving people, you serve God. And so we got to talking about the plan of salvation. We got to talking about that there is a life after this one. It doesn't end here. We will see our loved ones and know them after this life. And we talked about ultimately the atonement, and because of the atonement, we have certain really great benefits. Which one is the resurrection. So we talked about how her husband that was deaf and had certain difficulties would be one day resurrected, as would she, and they would embrace in perfect bodies. And as we were talking and sharing scriptures, she just kind of got a little bit more quiet, and she started weeping again. But it was a different kind of cry. It was more like a cry of relief. And she was just saying how thankful she was that we arrived, and she was just really in a low point. And we just bore our testimonies and said, we're here for you. Anything you need, we'll do it. No, we love you. You're our sister. We care about you. You're a child of God, and so does your husband. You'll see him again. Don't worry about it. And so we ended on a great note, and scheduled a time that we might come back and see how she was doing. When we left, technically it was a great lesson, just because of the Spirit. My companion and I were, passing off the time to each other. We weren't, one person wasn't talking for too long. We were passing off. It was just like very good, very dynamic on a technical side. But when I walked away, I think for the first time, just because I had all that experience of being on the mission, I just looked at my companion. We walked away in silence. We arrived to the road we were walking up previously, and I just turned to him, and he just turned to me, and we kind of just looked at each other for a second, and I said, today we helped someone. Like, we served, we did our purpose. We're not going around selling something. We helped a child of God. And however it turns out, we did our part, and I felt that she felt God's love. And, there's a whole other story of what happened to her. But in the mission, that's all that matters. Our goal was to invite others to come unto Christ. But not only that, invite others to feel the love of Christ. Feel the love of God for our Heavenly Father. And it was a great testimony to me that God can work through you to touch His children and help them through hard times. And I love that. I always think about that as the ultimate reason you go on a mission, to help people. Not to get your point across, but to help them. It's up to them what they'll do with your help. But that's beside the point. My last story would be, again, toward the end of my mission, if you're going to serve in the Philippines, you'll be very quickly introduced to a church organization called Iglesia ni Cristo, which is in several ways, in several aspects, similar to our church and organization, but not in a lot of ways as well. And so we met this one individual. His name was Leo. We were just talking to everyone that seemed to be, able to speak. And I was on an exchange, and he was sitting, I don't know, about 100 feet away, and behind this gate on this hammock with his son, I think 6-month-old son on his lap. And it doesn't look like he's doing anything. And so I call over to him and say, "Hey, can we talk?" And he's just like, "Sure." He's just like, "Come on through." Not the best introduction icebreaker, but it worked. And so we got to talking to him about the priesthood and how he could bless his family with the priesthood. And he was interested in that. And he informed us that he used to be Iglesia ni Cristo, but he'd been excommunicated because he married his wife, who is not of the same faith, and that's what happens when you're in that religion. We ended up teaching him for about 5 months. At the time of I left, he was conflicted from his past religion and what he felt in our lessons. And our lessons, again, were very technically well done, but ultimately that's not the ultimate idea. You can be as technical as you want in a lesson. There could be no spirit, and you didn't really do anything. You just talked at someone. You didn't talk through someone's heart. But a lot of times I knew that he felt it. I felt it. My companion felt it. And sometimes even his wife, who wanted nothing to do with us, would feel it and address it. And then she'd go back in her own corner. But it was just so thick, obvious. And don't know exactly what happened with him. I tried to contact him. He hasn't written me back, but I guess I'll find out. I'll ask. I need to write that companion and see how it worked out. But I think that was an investment. I don't think maybe it wasn't his time, but I definitely think that he would have been an amazing priesthood holder. Amazing. I could just see him baptizing his children. And I had a dream one night that he would just baptize his children in white. And he just seems so happy. Such a great guy. It's just the traditions of man that kind of prevent you doing of doing what God intends you to do and what He tells you to do through promptings. And most of the time, when you ask people to pray, they will not be willing to accept the answer that they get, whether it be yes or no. They'll have some preconceived notion that it's this way and God will say yes. But one thing that's important to understand is when you're talking to people, especially investigators, and you ask them to pray, is that you have to ask them if they will be willing to pray sincerely, open-mindedly, and accept whatever answer that they get, even if it's contrary to what they previously thought. It's easier said than done, right? But this guy, he was just great. And so you'll have a lot of investigators like that. Never got baptized in my time, but that doesn't mean anything. I've often heard, seeds are placed before the crop is grown, which means, on average, the investigator is offered a message about the restoration about 6 or 7 times before they even get baptized. So they actually have like 6 or 7 different missionaries offer the message and start the lessons with them before they get baptized, or they've been in contact with some person 6 or 7 times before that stage. And so sometimes when you talk to people and you're thinking, oh, no one's going to accept it, it's at the wrong time of the day, you have just to think, well, maybe they won't get baptized, but I might be that, 5th contact that they had with a member of the church. And just be one step away, the next person that talks to them might be the one. And so that's the work. It's chipping away at the mold, I guess, that comes around the kingdom of God and keeping it clean. And it's most of the time, especially for me, I never saw a lot of the results. I heard about them, but I never saw a lot of the results on the mission. I did have a lot of results, but a lot of them I did not see. And the point is that you go on your mission, again, to serve because you love them, because it's great. You don't go because you're trying to get your point across because, oh, I had 150 baptisms on my mission. Not really important. Baptisms are important, but the number should not be remembered or held so in glory. Because, yeah, you helped baptize 150 people, but in the end, you didn't baptize them. Heavenly Father did, through Spirit. You were just a conduit. That's all Heavenly Father needs. He just needs hands. And, so you'll probably find that along the mission, just people that are just great people that just aren't ready for it. But don't be discouraged. Love them no matter what. Welcome to the Cauayan City, Philippines Mission. It's a beautiful mission. Now, if you're new, especially as you go out into the field, it's very common to be discouraged with your capabilities with the language. No matter what level you are at the language, everyone feels it in one degree or another. I would encourage you not to, as I said before, it's sometimes more easy said than done, but in any way possible, to not get down on yourself with the language. The best missionaries that I've known in my whole life are those who did not have a knack for languages. That doesn't mean that they weren't able to express themselves. They just weren't the most eloquent in the language that they were supposed to learn. But the language of the Spirit that they spoke was so strong. It'd bring you to your knees. It'd bring grown men down and just crying. And it's really beautiful to see those experiences to where, the language is important. And I encourage you with all the strength of my being to learn the language and not to give up on it, but to also be patient with yourself and with God and realize that you're not there to learn a language, you're there to serve others by helping them to feel the Spirit. The second thing I would say is that on the mission, it's living every day in a spiritual sense is amazing and a blessed opportunity. Some people, I would say, take that to a level that wasn't intended. And I mean that they live absolutely by the letter of the gospel law. And that's not bad. They are obedient. But obedience without understanding, obedience without love, and I guess you'd say obedience just because you're told to do it is sufficient. But I would encourage you to be more than that. Obey because you want to. Obey because you love it. You love God. Obey because you want to be the best missionary that you can. And in that way, not only live the letter of the law, but live by the spirit of the law. Understand that people are people and that everyone needs to grow, even yourself. It took me a while to understand that there needs to be a balance between living the letter and the spirit of the law. Now, never get wrapped up in something that you'll regret later on in your mission. Try to do the best you can every day, but also realize that you are a person and that you are on a progressive path. And you will hit certain points in your mission that will be difficult, but the dividends, the results of your mission will be infinite. Don't ever consider going back home. And I don't say that as a, drill sergeant kind of thing. I say that as a person who finished the mission, who started out pretty weak, and I never considered going home. I promised myself I'd stay, no matter what happened, no matter what I felt at the certain time, and I think that idea and just staying and doing the best that I could. In the end, I am so better for it. I'm a better priesthood holder. I'm a better son of God. I understand myself more. I understand people more. The mission is a blessing that has no price on it because it is a rarity that most people do not have in this life. You will cherish the fact that you served a mission not only in this life, but in the life to come. You will not regret it in the least bit. It will be an absolute beautiful part of your life. Never look at the mission as a crutch. A lot of people finish the mission and say, well, that was all right. I progressed and I met some people. But go into the mission having in mind that when you give your farewell testimony, that you say that you are speechless in a good way, that your testimony has been strengthened. If you can leave your mission and say that you were the best convert that you made amongst others, I would say that you are infinitely successful. I feel that I was the best convert on my mission amongst others, and I am so in debt to my Heavenly Father for that. People say I went on my mission to give back a little bit. It's kind of ironic because on your mission you try to give back, but in the end you end up owing a lot more to your Heavenly Father for everything that you've become. I definitely believe that the church is true with all my heart. It's been a progressive process. At the beginning of my life, I'd say I'd relate myself to a moon. Moon being that it doesn't project its own light. It borrows light and projects it to others, to the earth, to other bodies. And on my mission, I became a star, and a star projects light from within, from itself. And so I didn't live off borrowed knowledge forever. I've developed my own testimony no matter what happens with those I've grown up with my parents, with my friends. I know that this is true. I know the Book of Mormon is true. It's a wonderful book that I was able to study and learn more about, as well as the Bible, and they complement each other so amazingly. The mission is everything and more. It's beautiful, and I can't be more. I can't say more strong words to those of you who are a little anticipatory about going on a mission. It's normal. Don't think that you're weird about being sitting on the fence about serving a mission. It's definitely a decision to make, but make sure it's your decision. Make sure that it's something that you definitely do. I can't express, and right now you might not be able to understand how much you can change for the better on your mission, but it's really truly a miracle in of itself. I love the Philippines with all my heart. It held 2 years of my life. I wouldn't give up any time of those 2 years for anything. Best 2 years of my life thus far. The most challenging 2 years of my life, but it was so great. And knowing what I know now, if I were to go back and someone were to say, okay, here's the mission call, I would be so excited to serve. And so I encourage you to have the best time you can on your mission. You know, do your best. Make it so you don't have any regrets. Learn as much as you can about the atonement, and learn to love. And I wish you good luck. Have a great time, because you will have a great time.
The Philippine culture is a really cool thing. My favorite part of Philippine culture, I'd have to say, is their attitudes toward life. They're just so fun-loving, and they're very laid back and very mellow. I don't know how to describe it. I guess you could say it's kind of a Hakuna Matata kind of a attitude. Very, very happy people, and I love that. It was so cool to get to know that side of the culture, that side of the people, that fun-loving, laid-back attitude. They're just so, even when things get tough, they don't complain about it. They don't whine about it. They just try to enjoy life, and I think that's so cool. And part of that attitude, I think, is part of that that attitude, that laid back attitude, it rubbed off on me out there, and that made the work really fun. Even when you're having a hard day, I learned that there are blessings to focus on, and there are good things every day to celebrate. And that's one thing that I took away from the Philippine culture. My two favorite ways of getting around are through jeepneys and tricycles. Jeepneys are iconic in the Philippines, kind of like how those yellow taxi cabs in New York are iconic for the United States. Jeepneys are made out of old World War II military jeeps. The people have taken those and converted them into mini buses, and they're pretty cool. Inside, the seats run perpendicular to the driver's seat. You hop in, you find a spot to sit, and you ride until you want to get off. When it's time to get off, you yell out, "Para po," and you pay however much you need to pay, and you hop off. Sometimes jeepneys are so full that if you want to ride, you're going to have to climb up on the roof and ride up there, or at the very back there are spots where you can stand and hold on. And that's always fun, to feel the wind rush through your hair, and I always liked riding on the back of jeepneys like that. In addition to jeepneys, there are tricycles, and those are really fun as well. A tricycle is a motorcycle with a side cab attached to it, and you usually ride on tricycles when you're going shorter distances. If you're in a more urban area in the city, you could take tricycles from neighborhood to neighborhood, and those are a lot of fun to ride in too. Some of my most favorite experiences in the Philippines are after working a long day, riding home in a tricycle and just relaxing in that side cab and looking out at either the city that I was working in or the rice fields. It was a very relaxing time. Loved riding in tricycles. We were out in the farmland, in the rice fields and in the mountains, and the mountains, in the mountain areas there was rainforest, really beautiful area, and there were some cool animals out there. Not a ton of animals, but they had, for example, monkeys, which were really fun to interact with. There were a couple times in my mission when got to hang out with some monkeys. It was, who gets to experience that? You know, a monkey. It was really cool. I can remember having this monkey just kind of sit on my shoulder, and it would kind of go through my hair, I guess looking for something to eat. I don't know. It was quite the experience. Really enjoyed that. Saw quite a few monkeys out there. Not all of my monkey experiences were awesome. I remember one time, one of the first monkeys I met sat on my shoulder, and I was posing for a picture, and the monkey must have been really nervous. I don't know, but it ended up pooping on my nice clean white dress shirt, and so we had to run home after that and get a new shirt on. But monkeys were really cool to interact with out there. I really like too the carabaos. It's like a water buffalo, and something that the farmers use for help out on the farms. Strong animal, hardworking. Really good metaphor, I think, for the people out there. Very hardworking, strong, kind animal. It's a kind animal as well, and the people are very, kind to it. Really cool animal for the Philippines. For me, I enjoy. This is going to sound kind of weird, but I enjoy drawing carabaos, and for me, the carabao is just a symbol of the Philippines, a symbol of the people and how diligent and hardworking they are. Really cool animal, the carabao. I really lucked out because my mission covers Ifugao province, which has the Benawi rice terraces. The Benawi rice terraces, a lot of the Filipinos refer to it as the eighth wonder of the world, and I have to agree with them. It is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. To get there, you ride on a jeepney, which is one of the most popular means of public transportation there, and you drive up into the mountains. And when you get to Benawi, it takes your breath away. It doesn't look real. You get there and everything is really green, really alive. There are low-hanging clouds, waterfalls spread around, and then there are the terraces that are cut into the mountainside. It looks like a staircase, going up the mountain, and it is absolutely amazing. I got to experience it twice, and both times we were able to hike around the terraces on these little trails that the farmers use. And we got to go into a few of the villages where the Ifugao people live and talk with them and meet with them. A really cool experience. We got to hear stories about their history, about their past. During one of our hikes, when we were in one of these villages, we got to hear the story of Benawi's history, and we found out that, at least according to this legend, the ancestors of the Ifugao people, went into the mountains to escape tribal wars about 2,000 years ago. And when they got there, they had a hard time planting rice. They didn't know how to plant the rice in the mountains, and they say that a white god appeared to them and taught them how to build these terraces into the mountainside. And I just thought that was a really cool story, and we were all amazed by it. Really cool experience. I'll never forget my time in Benawi. It was it's a trip. Those two trips to Benawi, I'll always cherish those. Those were some great times, and hopefully I'll be able to make it back there again and check it out. Really one of the coolest places, I think, in the world. awesome place. To experience some different foods there, some weird foods. I had this dish called Dennou, which is pig meat, pork, cooked in its own blood. And by the time the cooking process is over, the blood kind of looks chocolatey. And so, funny story, when I was new, I ate Dennou probably every day for lunch for a couple months because there was a member who owned a little ulam shop, and she wanted to feed us for free, and that was the dish that she wanted to give us. And I never really questioned it. I thought it tasted pretty good. I remember a couple times asking my companion what it was we were eating, and he would always just say chocolate pork. And I went along with it until one day I went on an exchange with an American, and we sat down to eat there, and she brought out the Dennou, this awesome member. You know, she brings the food out, and she's so happy to serve us. She puts it down, and I take a bite out of the Dennou like I usually do, and I look over at the elder across the table, and he's looking at me like, "You eat Dennou?" And I was like, "Yeah, all the time." And that's when he explained to me what it was, and that's when I found out what it was I had been eating. And it was a little harder to eat after that, after finding out what it really was, but still I thought it was pretty good. I think Dennou still a pretty awesome dish. So in addition to Dennou, I also got to try Balut, and it was a pretty cool experience. Balut is a duck or chicken egg that has about a 17-day-old fetus inside. And what you do is you crack the egg open and you sip out the broth that's inside. There's a little bit of juice, a little bit of soup in there, and it tastes pretty good. To be honest, it tastes like chicken noodle soup. And then you crack the rest of the egg off and peel the rest of the egg off, and it's a little terrifying, but you eat, this bird, this little baby bird, and it's crunchy, cartilagey. That's how I would best describe it. Crunchy, cartilagey, but pretty good. It was, like I said, a really cool experience. After that, I really felt like I was a Filipino. Like I had attained that level. It was really cool. So at one point in my mission, I was called to serve in a place called Kataban, and it was a little farming community in the middle of nowhere. To be honest, we were very isolated. To get in and out of Kataban, you had to hike 3.3 miles. There wasn't a jeepney or a tri-C that would get you in and out. It was a little rugged dirt road, and you would walk that 3.3 miles to get to a little highway that could take you to a bigger town. While I was in Kataban, surrounded by farm fields, rice fields, tobacco, corn, I had the opportunity to do a little bit of farming. One day, I got to go out and plant mungo beans, which was really cool. Went out to this beautiful farm field of one of the members out there, and planting mungo beans, it's hard to mess that up. That's probably why they brought me with them. There's no way that this Americano could mess up planting mungo beans, so they brought me with them, and basically you just have a handful of the beans, and you just, as you walk down the field, you just kind of throw them down on the ground and spread them out, and that was really fun to work on the farm. Most of the time you're doing missionary work, but it was cool to experience that, to set some time aside for farm work and experiencing what what the people there experience every day. It was really fun, really cool. The number one thing in my mission, the number one profession, the number one job was farming, which was, I thought, a really cool profession. It just seemed, I know it's very hard work. I got to experience farming out there a couple times. But it seemed relaxing too, and it seemed like a very cool industry to be in out there. But in addition to farming, there were a lot of tailors, and that was cool as a missionary to be able to go to the market, find, a certain kind of tailor that you like, take it to a tailor and have that made into pants. It was cool to get, custom tailored pants out there as a missionary. There's a lot of skilled tailors out there, which was fun. In addition to that, there were all kinds of professions. I met a lot of cool investigators who worked at bakeries. They were bakers, and they made delicious bread, and it was fun because they would take me inside the bakery and kind of show me how it was done, and I kind of got to work the oven a couple of times. That's a cool profession in the Cauayan Mission where I was. Food is so fun in the Philippines. Finding food, shopping for it is an adventure in itself. You go to the palenque, the market, and you go through these. The palenque is like a maze of food stalls, and you go through this maze of vendors, and you find what it is you want to eat, and you take it home and you cook it. And honestly, you can't go wrong with any of the Philippine dishes that you want to make. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, your normal food that you're going to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is delicious, but then the desserts are amazing too. There's a dessert there called halo halo, and you can get it in a glass or a bowl. It's basically shaved ice with evaporated milk with all these other really good ingredients that you mix in there. Halo halo means mix, and so you mix all of these things together, and it's just delicious, really refreshing too after you've been out in the sun working all day. Halo halo is pretty amazing. Philippine cuisine is absolutely delicious. Every meal you're going to have two things. You're going to have kanin, which is rice, that Asian sticky rice, and then you're going to have ulam, which is any kind of topping, anything you could put over the rice, and usually it'd be some sort of meat. Could also be vegetables. One of my favorite Philippine dishes is chicken adobo, which consists of chicken, potatoes, onions, and it's all cooked in soy sauce and vinegar, and it is one of the best things that has crossed my lips. To this day, I'm constantly eating adobo. I make it a lot. My wife enjoys it, which is good. Honestly, it is the best way to cook that adobo style. It doesn't have to be chicken. I mean, you could make vegetable adobo, cook a bunch of vegetables with soy sauce, vinegar, in that style. And I'm convinced you could even cook a shoe in that style, and it would taste good. That adobo cooking process is just amazing. I'm sure crime exists in the Philippines, but I really never saw it. My mission, maybe my mission was just a unique area. We were out in the provinces outside of the capital, so maybe it's a little safer out there, but it was such a clean, safe environment. Whether I was in small rural farming towns or in the city, I got to experience the city as well. The cities in my mission weren't the biggest, but they were cities, and the last area I served in was called Tigigaraw City, and I always felt really safe there too, even in that urban environment with so many people. Like I said, a very clean place. People are so kind. I really didn't see crime. That said, it was probably there sometimes, but I really didn't experience it. It was cool to live in a place like that where you could just go out and feel good and feel happy, feel safe. Okay, 1 through 20 in Tagalog. Isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, lima, anim, pito, walo, siyam, sampu. Labing isa, labing dalawa, labing tatlo, labing apat, labing lima, labing anim, labing pito, labing walo, labing siyam, at dalawampu. I feel like I have a really good vocab in that area. You know, church vocabulary. Gospel, for example, is ebanghelyo. Baptism is pagbibinyag. Atonement is pagbabayad sala. Heavenly Father is Ama sa langit. What else? Resurrection, pagkabuhay na muli. It's hard to think of others off the top of my head. There's also Savior, which is a really cool word in Tagalog. It's tagapagligtas. It's cool when you really break down that word because ligtas means to save, and taga means one who. And so it literally means one who saves. And so I really like that word for the Savior. I thought that was very fitting, really cool. I love learning Tagalog in the Philippines. It's a beautiful language. And when I got back, I made sure to not forget it. I made sure to practice it as much as I could. And that's paid off. Because I ended up studying journalism at BYU, and recently, a couple years ago, got a job as a reporter for the Filipino channel's nightly newscast, which is called Balitang America. Most of the newscast is in English, but I get to speak some Tagalog sometimes, especially when I'm out interviewing people, and that's been really fun to keep up with Tagalog and to use that skill. It's really a fun language to speak, and it's always fun to see Filipinos get excited about that too here in the U.S. It's fun to see Filipinos and to go up and speak with them and talk to them in their native tongue. They get a kick out of that. They love it, and it's something I try to do as much as I can. Tagalog is a really fun language. It can be difficult to pick up at the beginning, and I think that's because the format is a little different. In English, you would word things in a different order, but in Tagalog, you'd want to, for example, if you wanted to say just a typical sentence like, I'm going to go to the market, you're not going to start with that personal pronoun I, but you're going to want to state the verb first, and then that personal pronoun, and then you're going to give the location of where you're going to the market. So it's you have to adjust to the order of how they word things, and that can be a little tricky at first, but it comes with time, with practice, and as long as you're speaking every day and doing your best, it'll come for sure. A beautiful language that is really fun to pick up. It's fun when it clicks. You know, I remember being a brand new missionary and being pretty good out of the MTC because I studied a lot in the MTC, put in a lot of time and effort. But I remember getting to the Philippines and it sounding so fast. It sounded so different from the MTC, and I got a little discouraged, but I stuck with it. And I remember within a month or so, it just clicking, and you started to hear the words. The speed was no longer an issue. Everything was becoming clear, and then speaking it came with that. It was really cool. You know, the mission I was in Region 2, it had the best weather in the world. It would get a little hot sometimes, but very warm, sunny. But it also got wet and rainy, and that was fun too. I was in one province called Nueva Vizcaya, and it was in the mountains, and it was so beautiful. Sometimes it felt like you could reach up and touch the clouds, and really loved the weather there when it was rainy. Seemed like it was always kind of drizzly, and it was fun to be in that kind of a climate. When I just got there to the Philippines, within the first 2 weeks, a typhoon came, Typhoon Yo-Yo, and I was serving in Quirino province. I was living in a town called Typhoon, and fortunately it didn't hit us very hard there, but south in the province south of us, province called Nueva Vizcaya, it caused a great deal of damage. We were able to go down and help out a little bit. It was amazing to see what the typhoon did. You know, it caused a lot of flash flooding, and what we ended up doing was going to an elementary school there, as well as some of the homes of the people, and our job was to get the mud that got in there out, and it was quite the job. The mud was, several feet high, and we just had to start shoveling it out, and it was a tough experience, but at the same time felt good to help out a little bit. It was really eye-opening to see what weather like that could do, to see what a typhoon could do, because growing up in Arizona, you didn't really get weather like that. So it was a neat experience. There's a lot of cool information out there about the history of the Philippines that if you read it, it'll tell you kind of how their culture became the way it is today. I know that around 1550, it became a colony of Spain, and so you have that Spanish influence. It was a long-time colony of the Spanish Empire, and then I know in 1900, after the Spanish-American War, the Philippines became a part of the United States, and so we had a lot of influence there, and there's a little bit of our culture there because of that. And then after World War II, we helped the Philippines become its own independent nation, and so from then on, they've had that, that freedom. They've been able to have their own country, which was something that they really wanted over the years. So it was cool that finally happened. One of my favorite stories from my mission revolves around basketball, and a guy we taught who we called Brother Honor. To get this story, you have to understand that the Philippines is crazy about basketball. That is their number one sport. They love it. Even out in the provinces where I was, away from the capital, they love basketball. They play it on dirt courts with makeshift hoops. They play in their flip-flops. It's really important to them. It's something they find a lot of joy in. And Brother Honor really liked basketball, and he was really good at it. For a Filipino, he was very tall, and so he dominated on the basketball court. And about the time we were teaching him, he was getting ready to play in a big tournament in his neighborhood. He was really excited about it. I remember visiting with him. He'd often tell us about this basketball tournament, how he was getting a jersey made for it, and it was going to be a lot of fun. And we were excited about it too. My companion and I, we were really excited about this tournament for Brother Honor. And we ended up finding out as the tournament got closer that all the games were going to be on Sunday night. And my companion and I, we were devastated, and we didn't have the heart to tell Brother Honor that might not be a good thing to do on the Sabbath. We didn't want to tell him. I don't think we had taught him yet about keeping the Sabbath day holy, and at that point we weren't excited to tell him about it, and so we kind of held back for a little bit and just, we played it by ear. And we actually showed up to his first game wanting to support him. So it was a Sunday night, and we swung by the court just to see if he was there, to see how he was doing, and he was not there. And the game started, and we hung out a little longer to see if he was just running late, and he didn't show up. We ended up going to his house. The door is open. We peek inside, and he is sitting there with his Book of Mormon open. His kids playing around him in the living room. And he is drawing, a talent of his. He was a very good drawer, and he's drawing a picture of Joseph Smith. He's drawing a picture of Joseph Smith, has this picture of Joseph Smith open, and he's using that to make the sketch of the prophet, and it was astonishing. I remember knocking on the door and peeking my head in and saying, "Brother Honor, you're not at the basketball game." And he looked at us and he said, "Yeah, it just didn't feel right. I didn't feel right playing basketball on Sunday on the Sabbath." And we were blown away. Like I said, I don't think we had even taught him that lesson about keeping the Sabbath day holy. He knew that himself. He felt that himself, and that was really cool to see. And he ended up being blessed because of that decision. Not long after that, within a week or two, the branches in the district there organized their own basketball tournament, and he got to be a part of that. And he was a big part of Branch 2's team, and he had a really good time being a part of that tournament, part of that league. So it was cool to see that, and it was cool. It's even cooler because eventually he and his family got baptized, and so that was a really good time during my mission. Really loved serving the Honor family during that time in my mission. One of the coolest experiences I had as a missionary was learning how important the Spirit is. I remember getting to the Philippines and having a focus on learning the language. And in my personal study, I kind of got away from reading the scriptures. And I was reading the Tagalog English dictionary. That's what I was studying, and I was so into that. And later in my mission, I started setting more time aside for the scriptures. I kind of split my study 50-50. And the first part of my personal study was for the scriptures, studying God's Word. And the second part was for studying the language. And there was a huge change in the way our lessons went. The spirit was so much stronger. I really felt like I was being guided, and I really felt like I was receiving inspiration, and that was a cool lesson to learn, how important it is to make that a part of your life, to get the Spirit in your life, and to have Him be a guide. Really enjoyed learning that. First of all, congratulations! You've been called to the best mission on earth. The Philippines Cauayan Mission is absolutely amazing. I've heard Elder Holland say that no other missionary enjoyed his or her mission more than him, and I have to respectfully disagree. I don't know if anyone enjoyed their mission more than me, and a lot of that was because of where I was in the Philippines Cauayan Mission. The people out there are the nicest people in the world. Your job is going to be to serve them, but really it's going to feel like they're serving you, and that's going to make it a little difficult. But it's awesome. The people are so good, and the culture is awesome. The scenery is awesome. The provinces that you'll serve in, Cagayan, Isabela, Quirino, Nueva Vizcaya, are the most beautiful provinces in the country. You're going to be in rice fields. You're going to be in the mountain, and you are going to have a great time. I encourage you to get into it as much as you can. Get into the mission culture. Get into the culture of the Philippines. Get to know the people. Get to know their hobbies, what they care about. Get to know their history. Just soak it in as much as you can.